On today's episode of The Heart of the Matter, we'll be talking about sexual abuse. Sexual abuse in Nigeria has reached alarming proportions. It's as many as 1 in every 4 women is being abused. Sometimes 70% of these women are abused by people they know. So we'll be talking today to Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru, who has formed a foundation. She's had this foundation going for about 9 years. It's called WARIF, which is Women at Risk Foundation. This foundation addresses abused women and deals with them on every side: physical, medical, spiritual, mental, emotional, trauma. And so stay tuned to The Heart of the Matter this week when we talk to Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru.
These things sometimes are psychological.
I think the financial cost as one of the many
was enormous.
was a God experience. I just wanted to find God.
Simply feeling like you're inspired isn't always so.
Tell us about the solution.
As one of
People
the
with
many
18 to 35 years of age out of work.
Hey, I don't have the skill for this particular problem to solve this particular problem.
None of us talked about the bread seller.
Welcome back to The Heart of the Matter, where today I'm talking with Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru. Dr. Dasilva-Ibru is a gynecologist and obstetrician. I always get that twisted in that. And she's also the founder of WARIF, which is Women at Risk International Foundation. Kemi, you're welcome to The Heart of the Matter.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, WARIF is a foundation that you established to help people who have become victims of sexual abuse. What made you, what prompted you, a successful gynecologist and obstetrician, to go into the nitty-gritty of sexual abuse?
Well, like you just said, my background is obstetrics and gynecology, and I have a private practice in Victoria Island. And for the last 10 years, I've been working with women in Lagos and surrounding communities. And by virtue of this specialty, I've been exposed to young girls and women that sadly have had awful sexual encounters, both either by perpetrators that are well known to them, and sometimes less so by strangers. And so I've, over the years, developed relationships with organizations, homes, shelters, and just women that have good intention.
Can you just tell me, what was it like when the first person told you about what she'd gone through? How did you feel? And what?
It was horrific. It was horrific, first as a woman, myself. Secondly, as a mother, because this was a very young girl. She was about 12 years of age. And also because I realized back then, this was almost 9 years ago, that there was very little infrastructure in place to assist her. And so I was compelled, if nothing else, to do more. And I guess 9 years later, the incorporation and establishment of the Women at Risk International Foundation was born.
Now, obviously you've heard all sorts of stories about rape. The average Nigerian probably doesn't know how common it is. Could you tell us a little bit about the incidents and the types of abuse that you find?
Well, sadly, in this environment, data is limited. We have some data that has been studies done by UNICEF in 2015 that confirmed that 1 in 4 women, by the time she reaches the age of 18, would have had one violent sexual encounter. And approximately 70% would have had more than one. And if we say that, we're a young country...
70% of the 1 in 4?
Yeah, 70% of the 1 in 4. And so, if we say we're almost 50% women in Nigeria, and we're 160 million, and we're a young country by and large, that's a lot of women.
What kind of sexual abuse is prevalent in our society? I know that you said earlier on that a lot of people are abused by people they know. Okay, that seems to be the majority of cases. So where does one actually encounter sexual abuse?
At home.
At home.
Usually in places that are considered safe havens for young women, children, and schools, sometimes even churches.
Okay. So let's look at home. Who are the main abusers?
Usually the financial provider, many a time.
So the father.
Many a time the father, or perhaps, especially in an environment such as ours, where we have extended relatives that come into our homes because out of, I guess the goodness of your heart, you're extending, assistance to family members, and so you encourage them to come to live with you. And so we have a lot of cases of uncles, family members, cousins that live in the home with these young girls that are the perpetrators of the crime.
What about domestic help?
Domestic help, less so when it comes to sexual violence. I think a lot more physical and domestic violence occurs with the house help and the nanny.
Being the subject, being the victims of the abuse.
Yes, perhaps. I mean, this is not something that I know for a fact, but if it stems from a place of frustration or anger at, say, the mother or the father of that child, this domestic help may lash out at this young child. And usually it's in a physical form of violence.
So usually it is probably an older relation abusing a younger child.
Yes.
Now how do they keep this away from parents?
The term that's used is grooming. They groom these children. So over a period of time, first we have to remember that these are people that are well known and loved by these young children. And so a lot of times you have a scenario where an uncle or a family member over the course of a period of time whilst living in the home would encourage the child by being playful, would probably, give the child gifts, and over time would start to expose the child to behavior that certainly is contradictory towards normal. And then you have other scenarios where threats are involved, where you have a family structure where that perpetrator is very much aware of the dynamics, that perhaps they know that these parents don't actually listen to their children. And so they're reassured that if a child should come up to their father or their mother to say, "Uncle did this to me," it's very likely that they might be told, "Oh, you have an overreactive imagination," and nothing will be done.
Okay, we're going to take a little break now. And when we come back, we'll talk about what parents can do in terms of sex education with their young children. So viewers, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment with the heart of the matter. Welcome back to the Heart of the Matter, where we're talking about sexual abuse. We're talking to the founder, Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru, of Women at Risk International Foundation. Now, you talked about young children being abused primarily by members of the family. Now, it blows my mind that fathers would abuse their children, but you're finding this. What can parents do in educating their children to prevent this kind of abuse?
Well, parents have to listen to their children. You need to not just listen, you have to believe your child when your child comes to you with a tale. And you have to investigate whether or not there's any truth to what your child is saying. It's not enough to essentially disregard anything a young child is saying to you because the child is of a particular age. You need to believe that child, pay attention. You need to pay attention to certain signs, certain mood changes of a child that perhaps essentially was a happy-go-lucky young boy who suddenly stays in his room all day. You need to pay attention and ask yourself why. Or you have to pay attention to signs with other adults, the interactions that occur. A young girl that suddenly doesn't want to say hello to uncle, where, a few weeks before, she was jumping on uncle's lap. That's a sign. You need to pay attention to those.
Somebody once said that you can actually begin to teach your child about the parts, the public parts. You can teach them the rhymes and so on. That if somebody touches them where they shouldn't, they're taught
Certainly.
to raise the alarm.
Exactly. And you need to As you said, speak to your child about the anatomy, the body parts. Explain to them about certain areas that shouldn't be touched by anybody. You should explain to them with the right terminology. We tend to shy away from terminology. And so therefore that confuses the child, especially as the child grows up. And you need to explain to the child that it's extremely important that if it should occur, say a stranger or even somebody well known to them, should touch or ask them to touch on certain parts that they shouldn't, they come to you. They should feel comfortable coming to you because it's wrong.
Now let's talk about the trauma. Because we know that people are traumatized when they go through any kind of abuse, but sexual abuse also seems to carry another level of trauma. What are the kind of things that the trauma does to a person who's been constantly abused?
The trauma is far-reaching. It's beyond the physical trauma to the woman's body. It's trauma to her mind. It's trauma to her spirit. And if we say that a woman is the very fabric of a home, and you take away her sense of self, her sense of trust, her sense of safety, and there's no doubt you can see the ripple effect that that would have, not just in the home, but in the community that she serves.
Okay. Now, what can be done to help somebody who's been through this kind of trauma?
Well, what we've done in the foundation is we've opened a rape crisis center. It's the WARIF Center. It's in Yaba. It's a medical facility that's a walk-in, free to all women that have experienced similar encounters. We have in-house medical staff that can offer immediate medical treatment, as well as the tests that need to be carried out in cases such as this. The forensic medical examinations for the judiciary and the courts, HIV tests to make sure that that's not a concern, as well as pregnancy tests. And then we also offer the psychosocial counseling that we just alluded to, which is extremely important. We ensure that these women are spoken to by qualified social workers, and they're giving follow-up appointments that are usually necessary in situations like this. And then the third aspect that we do at the center is social welfare. We're not in an environment where social welfare is readily available. And many a times, these poor ladies are forced to make poor choices because of the constraints of the environment they find themselves in. So we're able to initiate conversation with them to establish what their needs are and to offer them, say, accommodation or shelter if indeed the perpetrator is that father or that mother that they're living with. We offer them legal aid, because many a time the perpetrator goes free because they have no access to legal aid in this environment. And then we also offer vocational skills so that we can then empower them financially so they can then make the right choices that they need to make.
So I'm going to come back to this, but what you're offering is very, very expensive to offer.
Yes, it is.
So obviously we're going to talk about how you fund it at some point. But I just want to take you up on the forensic help you give. How soon must they come to you after an incident?
Within 72 hours.
Okay.
It's extremely important that they come within 72 hours, preferably without having bathed or had a shower, which is a very hard thing to expect a woman who has just undergone such a traumatic event to do. But in order for us to then, as you said, during the forensic examination, get all the necessary specimens that we would need within the 72-hour window, it would be preferable if she does come without having a shower.
Okay, so what you're saying is within 72 hours, you might still find evidence.
Yes.
And evidence is crucial to any prosecution that may result from the...
And in addition to the forensic aspect of things, also when we offer, for example, the post-exposure HIV drugs that are necessary in a scenario such as this, because the sexual encounter is unprotected. Again, this has to be administered within that window.
Okay. So it is very important, viewers, that you actually, if you know anybody that's gone through this, encourage them to go in within 72 hours.
That's correct.
Okay, now let's go to another subject that tends to be poo-pooed, if you like, in Nigeria, and that's the subject of rape. Now, sexual abuse is rape. We've been talking about sexual abuse in a home setting, and people could be tempted to call it something other than rape, though it is rape. now rape that's happening out there in society. What are you finding?
Rape in our society is very real. As I said, though we quote data such as 1 in 4, anecdotally, when you speak to enough people, you could very well find that these numbers are even more. Women, sadly, in our communities are not encouraged to speak out when they have had these awful encounters occur. And
is this cultural?
it's a global problem. I mean, the stigmatization that comes with assaults such as this is a globally recognized problem.
But probably more so
But
in an
more
African
so in the
setting.
context of the African setting, because, you know, we're considered as women to be, you know, vessels
The
that
lesser
are
vessel,
kept
the weaker vessel.
exactly. And in addition to that, I mean, I guess we're so concerned and caught up in what the community would make of this. And so families would rather hide an act that has occurred than actually admit, because they're so concerned about the community finding out. And so these poor girls are made to keep silent on this act, and therefore this leads to a sense of shame and, you know, self-judgment. And this can only have a more detrimental effect on the psychology of this woman.
Let's go a little bit closer to home. Rape in the home. Now, we've talked about children being abused, but is it possible for a husband to rape his wife or vice versa?
Yes, it is. Spousal rape is possible. Spousal rape is recognized. It's a very difficult one in the context, as you said, of our community, because it's not readily accepted as a crime, and it's not recognized by the average person when you say, oh, my husband's raping me, because in the context of a marriage and the establishment of marriage, you are supposed to be able to, if you will, have a relationship with your husband where sexual encounters do occur, and they should be freely given.
Now, I know this is not quite WARIF's, part of WARIF's portfolio, but the average man, if he was accused of rape, could say, it's the way she dressed. She seduced me. And so what do you say to that?
I mean, it's such a frustrating aspect of, if you will, the excuses that men would give. I mean, to say that a woman is dressed in a particular way, and then that gives you the right to force yourself upon her without her actually consenting to the act, is preposterous. I mean, it's almost like we're debasing ourselves and we're going back to, you know, devolving into animals.
So a woman's dress can have nothing?
Absolutely nothing.
So what is consent?
Consent is when a woman of consenting age,
Which is
18
in Nigeria.
says yes. She's a willing participant in the act. That's consent. So no means no when she says no, regardless of her
So
age.
it is rape once she says no.
Once she says no, it is rape. It is also rape if she says yes and she's under 18, because she's considered a minor. And it's certainly rape if she's asleep, if she's drunk, or if she's unconscious.
Where she would not otherwise
She
be able
would not
to say no.
otherwise have exactly the wherewithal to actually give her consent or not.
We're going to have to go on a break right now, but when we come back, we'll talk about the foundation, how the foundation is able to survive, what you want to do, what you can't do because you don't have the resources to do just yet. So if you'll stay tuned, we'll be back with Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru in a moment. Welcome back to the final segment of The Heart of the Matter, where we've been talking to Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru. And we've been talking about sexual abuse in Nigeria, a problem that is very rampant. And she said 1 in 4 women has been abused. Now, WARIF is doing a lot, medically, physically, also in terms of helping them get legal aid, dealing with the traumatic consequences of the abuse. How do you fund all of this?
Now, WARIF is a non-profit organization, and so we rely solely on donor funding by organizations, corporate bodies, and individuals. And it's challenging. Funding is a huge challenge. It's a daily worry. It's a daily worry because
You've got a center to
we
keep
have
going.
a center that we need to keep the lights on. We have women that come in, women that have to be seen and have to be treated when they do arrive. We've been able to estimate that it costs us about 66,000 naira per woman, seen over the course of a 6-month period. And
But how many women do you have to see?
We haven't put a cap on the number of women we have to see because it's a huge problem out there. And so we're open and available to all women that are in need of our services. The foundation implements different initiatives to address this problem. And the center, being in Yaba, is a prototype of sexual assault rehabilitation centers that we feel we can roll out in the different local government areas in Lagos and even across Nigeria. But we also address preventive initiatives. We're looking at a school educational campaign where we're going into secondary schools and looking at the mindset of the boy and the girl child at that age. Because anecdotally, we know that this is where the mindset is formed. And when you have a young boy who has seen his father beat his mother all his life, he starts to question what is gender-based violence, what is right or wrong. And the same with the girl child who has seen her mother cower. And so we feel it's important for us to establish quantitatively, collate data to show that this indeed is the mindset of our young, so we can start to introduce and educate and change the mindset through, additional curriculum in the educational system.
Now, if we have viewers out there who are listening to you and they want to help, what do they do to reach you if the help is financial or?
We're on all the social media platforms. So we're both on the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
How do they get you on Facebook or Twitter?
Our handle is WARIFNG,
Okay, so we'll put that on the screen.
WARIFNG. We also have our website,
Okay.
which is warifng.org. And information on donating and so on is all in there.
Okay.
We also have, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Baba, but this is very important to me to share. We have a 24-hour call line,
Okay.
which we encourage all women to call. We're at the end of the phone 24 hours a day. The number is 0809 210 0009. I repeat, 0809 210 0009. Thank you.
And so people should just call that number
Please
if
call.
they have any problems. And it's manned 24/7.
24/7.
Okay. So we'll put all that information on the screen, but just going back to you, you've been doing this for about 9 years now. What has it done to you to be doing all this work?
It's humbling. It's very humbling. It's a very sad space to be in because every day you have to deal with the horrors that young girls and women are exposed to. I'm still a practicing gynecologist in addition to this. But it's also extremely rewarding because you can see that you're changing lives. You're making a difference. And I think there's nothing more humbling and there's no larger privilege than to be able to do that.
So it is fulfilling for you to be able to do this.
Yes, extremely
Can I
so.
say that you found your calling in this?
I think you can very safely say I found my calling in this.
It's been really fun having you on the Heart of the Matter.
Thank you very much.
We will certainly, on behalf of the Heart of the Matter, make a donation to WARIF.
Well, that's very kind.
And that's the first time we've ever done this.
We're very grateful, very grateful to you.
But because we know how much damage sexual abuse in particular is causing our nation, because you just imagine, a mother is sexually abused, it's going to affect the quality of parenting. And if a child grows up in a home that has not received a warm, has not lived in a warm and loving environment, it's going to affect that child's home.
Yes.
You know, so the knock-on effect is impossible to consider. So it's been a great pleasure having you,
Thank you.
on
Thank
the
you
Heart
very
of
much
Matter, and
for
hope we'll
having
get you
me.
back again sometime soon.
Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Viewers, it's been real with Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru. We'll be back again with another episode of The Heart of the Matter, same time next week, so tune in. Until then, stay blessed.